Good morning and welcome to June's BookPal's AuthorConnect Chat, where we bring you conversations with leading authors. I'm your host, Tony DiGastanzo, president of BookPal. We have an exciting giveaway today. At the end of today's session, we'll be providing 3 copies of the author's book, so stick around through the end. Today's discussion is about the hidden drivers of performance that explain how we perform as individuals and as part of a team. Today's guest served in the Navy SEALs program for 20 years. As the officer in charge for a specialized command, he was intimately involved in the extremely specialized SEAL selection process. He also spearheaded the creation of the first ever mind gym that helps special operators train their brains to perform faster, longer, and better in all environments. Since retiring from the SEALs in 2017, he has worked as a speaker, facilitator, and consultant with Chapman & Company Leadership Institute and Simon Sinek. In January 2021, he released his first book, The Attributes, 25 Hidden Drivers of Optimal Performance, and is the founder and CEO of The Attributes, Inc., which provides speaking and consulting services. I'm excited to be joined by our guest today, Rich Diviney. Welcome.
Thanks, Tony. It's great to be here.
So perhaps for our audience, you can provide a quick overview of your new release. So for those that aren't as familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the idea of the attributes came about while I was still in the Navy, in the Navy SEALs, and I was running a selection assessment training program for one of our specialized commands, and we were having at that time difficulty articulating why certain guys were making it and certain guys weren't making it. And in kind of thinking through it, I had to go back to some of the roots of our very basic SEAL training, and I often kind of joke that in basic SEAL training, which is BUDS, basic underwater demolition / SEAL training, which is kind of the famous SEAL training that most people are know about, some of the toughest training in the
Hell
world.
Week and
Hell Week, and and the attrition rate is 90% about. Excuse me. And I kind of joke that in that training you spend hundreds of hours running around with heavy boats in your head and hundreds of hours exercising with 300-pound telephone poles and running around with those things on your shoulder and freezing in the surf zone. And over my career, I've done hundreds of combat missions overseas, and I've done thousands of training evolutions, and never on one did I carry a boat on my head or a 300-pound telephone pole on my shoulder. And so what that tells us is that they weren't in those moments of SEAL training, they weren't in fact training us in the skills to be Navy SEALs. They were in fact teasing out these qualities, these innate qualities that told them and determined if we had what it took to do the job. And so there's a difference between skills and attributes, and oftentimes performance is conflated with, it conflates skills and attributes, but skills are different. Skills are not inherent to our nature. They're not, we're not born with the ability to throw a ball or ride a bike or something like that. And they tell us what to do. They direct our behavior in specific known situations. Here's how and when to throw a ball or ride a bike. And as such, because they're tangible and they're kind of didactic, they're easy to assess, measure, and test. They're easy to score and place stats around. And this is why most businesses and organizations who are forming teams often get seduced, or hiring often gets seduced by skills, because they're measurable and you can score them. You can put them on a stat sheet and you can put them on a resume. But skills don't tell us how we're going to show up in uncertainty and challenge and stress, and when the environment is unknown, because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to apply a known skill to an unknown environment. This is where we lean on our attributes, things like patience, situational awareness, adaptability. And when we're born with these are innate, okay? We're all born with levels of this stuff. You can see it in small children. Certainly they develop over time and experience, but we all have these inside of us, and they don't direct our behavior. They inform our behavior. They tell us how we're going to show up to a situation. So my levels, or my son's levels of resilience and perseverance, for example, inform the way that he and I showed up when we were riding a bike, when we were learning how to ride a bike, that skill of the very first time, when we're falling off a dozen times doing so. And because they're hidden in the background, they're hard to see, measure, and assess. You can really see them the most visibly and viscerally during times of challenge and certainly in stress. So the book really speaks to this idea that oftentimes we judge performance and we hire based on skills when we should really be looking at attributes. And the attributes really outlines 5 categories of attributes that kind of drive our performance. What are the attributes that make up grit? What are the attributes that make up drive? What are the attributes that make up mental acuity? what are the attributes that make up great leadership, and what are the attributes that make up team ability, and I go into detail on what attributes are, the difference between skills and attributes, and then go in. Every chapter is, it kind of dives into these attributes. So the reader, this is not a Navy SEAL book, and it has a couple of vignettes about SEALs and family and sports and business, but it's really, the book is about the reader, and the reader can read the book and discover for themselves where they show up, and how they kind of, what kind of levels they have on each of these attributes. And so it's been real fun to get out there.
So I know you mentioned at the end of the book, the attributes.com website has some assessments. How do people tease these out? I obviously, as a business leader and owner, I can't put my team through a Navy SEALs Hell Week to identify attributes. At least not for all of them. Maybe a couple would enjoy it, but
Right.
But what are the methodologies that like a high performing team might use to tease out the right skills, the abilities at an attribute level?
Yeah, and so the attributes. So the first thing about the attributes is to say that we all have all of them. Okay,
Yeah.
the difference in each one of us are the levels to which we have each. Right. So if we take adaptability and say 10 is high and 1 is low, I might be a level 8 on adaptability. What that means is when the environment changes around me outside of my control, it's fairly easy for me to go with the flow and roll with it. Okay. Someone else might be a level 3, which means when the same thing happens to them, it's difficult for them to go with the flow and roll with it. They're still adaptable. It's just difficult.
Yeah.
And so we all kind of show up with these certain levels. And if you were going to line up the attributes on a wall like dimmer switches, we'd all have different sets and our lines would be different. Now, there's no judgment in that. It'd be like judging our hair color. Okay, there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it's who we are. And you can develop an attribute that you're low on. It just takes, you can't do it the same way you learn a skill, right? It takes self-motivation, self-direction, and willingness for that person to step into environments of discomfort to test and develop that attribute. So that's one part of that question, is that we all have this certain level of attributes. When it comes to a team or a business, the first job. So while we don't judge where we stand individually on the attributes, where attributes begin to show a priority or prioritize would be depending on the team and business, right? Because the list of attributes required to be a great Navy SEAL is going to look different than the list of attributes required to be a teacher or a police officer or a professor. So any team or business first has to figure out, okay, what are the actual attributes we're looking for, and then seek to then create environments and situations inside their team building processes or their hiring processes that test and tease that attribute. And it's going to take a little bit of discomfort. It's going to take a little bit of uncertainty. But like you joke, I mean, throwing a bunch of accountants into the surf zone in San Diego as if they're Navy SEAL trainees is not going to tell us a lot about what they bring to the table as accountants, right? So those situations have to be contextual. So there's some diligence that's required, and it's very subjective.
Yeah, I think the other fascinating aspect of this is because they're more inherent. There's a certain amount of patience that, as a leader, once you identify maybe an attribute isn't where yours is, in the sense of adaptability. For example, as a business owner, we're constantly looking at ways to improve software. So we might implement a new solution, and we have in the past struggled with change management because some people are like gung ho, great, let's launch this new software. It's going to make a world of difference, and other people are like, wait, we need training.
Right.
And so by identifying these attributes, you're able to adjust the level of communication and planning so that those people who maybe need that additional time to absorb everything and make the change are then excited and on board with it, versus the flip of a switch and here's the new software.
It's such a great it's such a great point, and it actually highlights another point, which is when you're looking at the attributes required to be on a team, whatever that list looks like. Sometimes it's actually good to have polarities that exist and a dichotomy inside of one team, right? So in other words, and I talk about 3 other attributes in the book that don't bin into those categories. They didn't really bin, and I talk about that as the others, which is a chapter. But one of the ones I talk about is patience and impatience, right? Because sometimes impatience is great, and sometimes patience is required, right? So a team that has both polarities actually allows that team to do more, and understanding those people who are patient and those people who are impatient allows the team to push forth those people who are patient when patience is required, and push forth those people who are impatient. So I always say a team is nothing more than two or more people working together towards a common goal or objective. And a high performing team is just that, but high performing, right? So a great marriage is a high performing team. A group of friends is a high performing team. My wife and I joke. I mean, in our marriage, and we've been married for 20 years. We have two kids who are teenagers now. I am an inherently patient person, and she is inherently impatient, right? That's worked beautifully for us because in life, right, when patience has been required, I've stepped up and taken lead. And
Yeah.
when impatience has been required, she's stepped up and taken lead, right? So teams, by doing this kind of analysis, can figure out what attributes are required, and then also think about which of the polarities that they also want to look for, because then you round out your team in a very holistic manner.
Yeah. There was a great example of a coach that, in your book has this decision to make of, and I think it's in this idea of identifying attributes, but coach has a decision to make. If he wants to participate in the tournament, he has to let 3 players go.
Right.
And we sort of go through these scenarios at which people, have their natural reaction to kind of determine their attribute. My competitiveness is off the charts. So
Yeah.
I'm similarly balanced with my wife, who comes at it from the perspective of more humility and all right, how are these kids going to feel if they're cut from the team?
Right.
And so, that balance is a fascinating point because, as much as strength, competitiveness plays in a business environment, most of the time driving me to do better as an organization, there's some big negatives if it hurts people's feelings without, sort of thinking through that aspect of the engagement.
Yeah, well, and it's another great point. So and glad you brought it up, because the 3 others that I talk about are in fact the other. I talk about them as being the others because the differences, the polarities of each can be very powerful. One is patience. So both patience and impatience can lead to high performance. I talk about competitiveness because competitiveness and non-competitiveness can both be very high performing. And then the other one is fear of rejection versus kind of insouciance to what people think. I don't care what people think. Both of those could be powerful. But when it comes to competitiveness, it's a really good point because I am not competitive. I never have been. And what that's allowed me to do is anytime I see people competing in a pack, I'm like, okay, what else can I do? I am always looking for the other thing, right? So I almost have this kind of how can I think outside the box mentality because I don't feel like competing. So yet in the business world, when you have certain genres that actually have rules and constraints and things and kind of feel environments inside which you have to compete, the competitive mind is extraordinarily powerful, right? So the SEAL teams is funny because the SEAL teams and SEAL training favors neither the competitive person nor the non-competitive person, right? So you have both polarities on the SEAL team, which is exactly what you need because when the environment requires a competitive mind, those people step up and lead. But when the environment requires us, oh no, we have to think completely differently and think outside of what everybody else is doing, that's when the non-competitive mind steps in. So those types of polarities can be very powerful. And I think to find those strengths in both is something that's interesting and why I kind of highlight that in the book.
Yeah, the diversity aspect of it is, I think, at times underrated.
Yeah.
When I think about maybe real life example, I'm at the gym. I feed off of my competitiveness to sometimes push myself beyond what I normally would be able to accomplish. And so, we had a gym competition and there was a couple of times after a specific event that I just laid on the ground because I was fatigued. I won the competition for our gym. So I suppose I was happy. But, at the same time, the interesting point that you're making is you're not competitive. So how do you think about, those environments of pushing yourself harder? I think, do people use different sort of attributes to drive them to a goal and sort of how do those interplay?
Yeah, I do. And so I tend to think of competitiveness as, so in other words, let me put it differently. I've never thought that one can compete against themselves. And the reason is because competition implies a winner and a loser. That's
Okay.
just what it is, right? So if I'm competing against myself, I either win or lose. It doesn't make sense to me. So I think when it comes to drive and being driven, it involves a whole host of attributes. Your desire to do better in the gym has less to do with you beating yourself and more to do with you kind of really wanting to explore your boundaries, push your edges, perseverance, adaptability, discipline. So So I think when we talk about our performance, all of these attributes come into play, and it both be enormously difficult, but also irresponsible of me to try to pick and choose which ones are the most important, because it's going to be very contextual to whatever genre, whatever niche you're kind of trying to live inside of, right? This is why I say, I think of us human beings. We're all the same, right? We all have to remember that we're all human beings, okay? But we're like automobiles, okay? So in other words, some of us are Jeeps, and some of us are Ferraris, and some of us are SUVs. And there's no judgment in that, because the Jeep can do things the Ferrari can't do, and the Ferrari can do things the Jeep can't do. But it behooves us to look under our hood and figure out what we actually are, what engine we're running with, because we may be a Jeep trying to run on a Ferrari track, or it might be a Ferrari trying to run on a Jeep track, and that's okay too, because it's our choice. But what it does, by knowing that, it starts to say, okay, this is what I actually need to work on. If I am in fact a Jeep and I want to run on a Ferrari track, no problem with that. Now I know why it's going to be difficult and what I need to work on. Or you say, actually, that's why I'm unhappy. That's why I'm not fulfilled, because I'm a Jeep trying to run on a Ferrari track, and I need to get on a Jeep track. So I think the idea of the attributes that allow us to succeed, it's all very individually based, and it's all very subjective to the context of where we actually want to perform and where we actually want to kind of excel. That's why knowing our attributes is the first step, because then we can start figuring that out.
Well, and I think too, we tend to, as a species, I think, have a certain amount of arrogance about our own perspective being the right perspective. There was a fascinating interview with Brene Brown and the author of The Coaching Habit, Michael Bungay, I think. And what was fascinating about it is, in the coaching environment, he basically makes the point, look, as somebody who's being asked a question in a coaching sense, we tend to have this propensity to believe that what we're going to give as feedback is absolutely brilliant, it's the right idea, but ultimately it's biased based on our own experiences and time. And so I could kind of see the same thing happening in the sense of what I bring to a meeting a lot of times is that set of attributes, that set of history, that experience. And so, I tend to say, oh, here's my perspective. And the reality is, as a leader, collecting all of these divergent thoughts and leveraging the attributes that other people bring to the table is going to be what ultimately drives the most powerful result.
And it's why open-mindedness is an attribute underneath the drive category, because open-mindedness allows us to think outside our own perspective. Now, open-mindedness is more of a passive act, right? Can we passively just be open-minded about what's coming to us? But then there's the attribute of curiosity, which I don't actually talk about in the book, but it is an attribute. Curiosity is in fact that's the proactive, that's the proactive version of open-mindedness. That's the person who is like deeply curious. And we all know those people who are really curious they tend to be successful. They tend to be open-minded. They tend to find pathways and things that others don't, because they are proactively open-minded. But if you don't find yourself, in fact, that much of a curious person, at a minimum, you want to be open-minded for those exact reasons that you described.
Yeah. What was the sort of origin story on the attributes, and was it while you were in the SEALs that all of this sort of started connecting the dots, or did it kind of all come together just after you left?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think it was I first started thinking about them when I was in the SEALs, and I was running this training program, and we were trying to articulate why guys were making it and why guys weren't. And what we were finding was our reasons, our explanations up to that point were largely skills based, right? The guy couldn't shoot very well. The guy couldn't do this very well. But it did make sense, because the guys who were coming through our particular program were already very experienced SEALs, right? So they obviously had done a lot of shooting, and it just didn't make sense. And so that's when I started deconstructing, okay, there's a difference here. And I and my team who were interested in this really started kind of saying, okay, what are the attributes we're looking for? And we kind of started looking at it from a different lens. And then it kind of went dormant, because I spent a few more years in the teams, and I got out. And once I got out of the Navy, and I was talking about leadership, and I was talking about high-performing teams, and I was getting a lot of people and business people coming up and telling me, hey, Rich, we forming high-performing teams, or we're forming dream teams. Like all these people who have the best marketing person, best salesperson, best graphic. We're getting the best people from all these different departments, and we're putting them together. And quite often, even though things go well for a little bit, as soon as things kind of take a turn or go sideways or don't go as planned, the teams are turning toxic. They're not able to work together. What's going on? And it was very easy for me at that point. I was like, well, the reason is because you're picking your teams based on the wrong criteria. You're picking your teams based on skills instead
Yeah.
of picking your teams based on attributes. And so at that point I said, boy, someone could write a book on this. And I said, maybe it'll be me. Maybe I should do it. And so that was really the impetus. And so it was really during the writing process and I loved the writing process because it really allowed me to dive deep and explore this stuff and think about it way more deeply than I had ever in the Navy. And so it started in the Navy, and then it really evolved and got really deep during the process of writing the book.
When you think about that scenario, you have this team that was perceived to be the dream team, and you see it, even in basketball and other areas outside of business where you think putting all of the right players together is going to result in the championship, and something happens, and maybe somebody gets injured or there's a coaching change or whatever, and that throws it off. Or you have the project team that maybe the client makes a change, like you suggested in the book as an example. Do you need to reconstruct the team, or are there things that the leader can do differently, noticing that the attributes are off, to get it back on track? So how do you kind of think about that scenario? You have this client deadline. Do you have to pull in new players, or is there a way to fix for this?
Well, if the team has been solely collected or built on skills, then there may be some reconstruction that's required.
That's very, yeah,
However, I think any person who's on a team or in charge of a team can immediately ask themselves the questions: okay, what attributes are required right now,
yeah.
and see if those attributes currently exist in the team,
Mm,
and recognize that they may in fact exist, and it might be that person who's stayed quiet in the corner and hasn't said a word. Right, that might be the person that you need to bring up and say, okay, lead us through this, right? But it requires a look. So I think any person in the situation where they already have an existing team and they feel like the team could do better, or the team's starting to go off the rails, no matter where you sit actually in your team process, it's really behooves you to look at these attributes, because you're going to start to understand how the team is going to operate in uncertainty, challenge, and stress, and then B, who are the ones who are going to be required to step up, or who are the ones you're going to be able to lean on, because
yeah.
in certain times, certain attributes are going to be needed more than others, and you say, well, that this person who typically doesn't seem like they provide a lot of value, boy, that's the exact person that we want in this situation. So that person can, and what it does is it gels the team in ways that are much, much deeper than skills based collectives, right? Because now you're leaning and trusting people with things and with qualities that are much more innate, and you find yourself being able to perform much more effectively and really perform through hard times. And we all know, without looking at any science, without looking at any books, we all know experientially that anybody who goes through hard times together, they typically and does it successfully, right? They
Yeah.
typically bond. They typically become even more close, even more trust is built usually during those times. So it's a way that can happen.
Well, and I think there's a, a number of SEAL-like examples you use in the book, like close quarter combat, CQC, where as somebody comes in the door, they're following, comrade will go the other direction, and there's this evolving sort of nature that is very fluid as the building is cleared. That example really speaks to what you're talking about in a team dynamic, where I think a leader tends to come in as a project manager and sort of be this command center, but the fluidity of pulling in team members to do different pieces, I think, is overlooked oftentimes in a business context.
Yeah.
Where they
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the idea. So I talk about this in terms of what the task organization actually looks like in a high performing team, and it does not look like the hierarchical pyramid. It doesn't look like the flat line. It doesn't even look like the Robert Greenleaf upside down servant leadership model either. It, in fact, and the way I drew it out when I was asked by a bunch of executives, was it looks like a blob. It looks like an amoeba, and the idea is that in that. And we call it dynamic subordination. In a dynamic subordination environment, what happens is the team understands that problems and issues and challenges can come from any moment, at any time, and any angle. And when that problem hits, the person who is the closest to the problem and the most capable immediately steps up and takes charge, and everybody else follows, right? And then when the environment changes again, someone else steps up and takes charge. And so this is what people in charge and leaders need to think about their teams being, because it's more of a flock of birds or a school of fish. It's an organism that reacts and responds, and I call it alpha swapping. It's where people are just immediately dynamically swapping between leader and follower relationship. This happens all the time in SEAL teams, and I use close quarter combat as an example, but the example I'll use that's familiar to everybody would be the commercial airliner, right? No one would debate that the captain of that aircraft is in charge, right? Everybody knows that. No one would argue that. However, if on taxi out to takeoff, the captain gets a call from the maintenance guy, and the maintenance guy says, "Hey, I found a problem. You need to turn the plane around." No captain worth their wings is going to ignore that that directive, right? They will immediately subordinate to that maintenance guy, turn the plane around, and take it back to the gate. And then once that happens, and they realize they have to deplane the plane, the captain doesn't take charge of that either. The flight attendant steps up and takes lead, right? And the captain subordinates the flight attendant while the flight attendant deplanes the plane. This is dynamic subordination in action, right? And this takes trust, and it takes honesty, and it takes a transparency of each team member's strengths and weaknesses, and their attributes and their skills, right? So we know it all. So actually, I know exactly when I can lean on my teammate. They know when they can lean on me, and it's all out there. And transparency and vulnerability and everything's there, and that's how that actually operates.
I love the model. I think I could definitely see some challenges in the trust aspect. Do you find that this idea of a leader subordinating their power becomes a difficult part to train into the conversation when you're coaching
Well,
about
yeah,
this?
it has to start with trust, and the leader has to be the first one to go.
Yeah.
I mean, if the leader, again, leadership, people conflate being a leader with being in charge. Okay, they're not the same thing. One's a noun and one's a verb. Okay, and you don't. I always kind of say, and it's been in my experience, you don't get to call yourself a leader. You don't get to self-designate. That's like calling yourself good-looking or funny. Okay. It's other people decide whether or not they want to follow you. All right, and it's based on your behaviors. And those behaviors those are attributes. Those are attributes-based behaviors, which I talk about in the book. But those behaviors are the same behaviors that build trust, right? And part of that trust is vulnerability, and part of the vulnerability means that leader says, "Hey, I need you." That's actually those are the three most important words anybody in charge, any leader can say to anybody on their team is, "I need you." Okay, because what that is, it's an expression that, hey, you bring to this team experience, attributes, skills, and perspectives that I don't have and none of us have. So we need you here. You are important. You are an important valued member. And any leader that does that habitually creates an environment where every team member is mutually supportive of each other. Because guess what? The team members are saying that about the person in charge as well. Because the person in charge also has specific jobs and tasks and responsibilities that they are required to bring to the table, and all the team members are going to lean on them when it's their when those are required. But it's that kind of mutual respect and vulnerability and transparency that have to happen. If I find leaders who are there because it's a position for them, they're egotistical, or for them the identity is actually the name is the position or the rank. There's a lot of work that's involved to get that person to cede their rank, I guess, and admit that they're not the top dog, right? And that if that's the case, it's a long road.
Yeah, and I think some of that is just I suppose a component of training, but it's ensuring that people have the comfort with their team members that they can put them in charge. And
yeah. Well, leadership's about. Leadership also. That's another reason why we get confused about the word leader, is because the noun implies someone in front, right? Leader of the pack, leader of the whatever marathon. Okay, and we all know that the best leaders are actually usually in back. They're pushing, they're empowering, they're inspiring, they're allowing the people in their span of care to grow and to actually to grow and evolve beyond them. I always used to tell my junior officers that they had to accept the irony of leadership, because the irony of leadership says, if you do your job right, you eventually work yourself out of a job. You create an environment where they don't need you anymore.
Exactly.
And that should be every leader's goal, to be honest with you. But you have to put away your ego
Exactly.
if you're gonna have that happen. So
yeah, and sometimes once you reach that role, you don't want to give it up as easily.
Right.
But that's where you become the most successful when you do.
Yeah.
I'd love to maybe just in the last couple minutes visit something that was part of your bio that we didn't talk about, which is the Mind Gym. I find the concept really fascinating. Do you mind just maybe 2 seconds of what that was about and how it sort of,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, so the Mind Gym. So while I was in the same job where I was running this assessment selection course, I was running the human performance element of it as well for the command.
Mm,
And we were at this was mid 2000. This was about 2008, 2010ish or so. And so we had been at war for quite a while at that point, and we were finding that we wanted to do better. The question was always, how could we do better, faster, stronger? But again, when it came to the physicality of that, we as SEALs were pretty darn good. I mean,
yeah.
we were pretty in shape, and running the mile faster or lifting more on the bench press wasn't necessarily going to make us better, faster, stronger. And so I and a couple of the guys on my team recognized that the next frontier was the mind. Could we begin to explore the mind and kind of a working relationship with our brains that allowed us to do better? And we began to just throw a bunch of things on the wall. A lot of it was mental health. A lot of it had to do with understanding the physiology, the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, what they do for our physiology in terms of chemical reaction and response times and things like that. And the fact that you could actually tap into those, you actually take better control of those by understanding breathing, understanding your brain, understanding what happens when we actually can be more proactive through whether it be breathing, visual tools, visualization, relaxation, meditation for some. And so it was a really very experimental, and we just threw a bunch of stuff against the wall, put it in a room, and had guys start trying it. And I'm assuming they're still doing some of that now. I'm not sure. It's been a while. But the problem inherently with any type of endeavor like that is it's very difficult to measure. You can very easily measure physical performance, and you can measure how someone starts here and gets there and what that delta is between. Very difficult to do that on a mental realm. How do you measure mental performance and getting better with it? I mean, it's tough to start to put together those deltas, and it's usually the deltas that drive funding. so I think we'll see.
I know with stress reduction, there's a lot out there on, seal breathing, the box breathing technique where you're holding breath as on the intake and slowly releasing. Are there other sort of one or two other key takeaways that people could implement into their real world that you discovered were really effective techniques for improving performance?
So a visual tool, a very simple visual tool. So what the box breathing does, or CO2 blowout breathing does, is it helps shift your physiology from sympathetic system to parasympathetic. What that means for listeners is that you're going from the action setting to the rest and digest setting.
Fight or flight.
Yeah. But even high excitement or great pleasure is sympathetic. I mean, so it's just you're burning energy. You're in the moment, right? Good or bad. But we also have to recover, and the parasympathetic is designed to get us into the recovery. Well, if we are in a fight or flight, obviously our sympathetic system is firing up, ramping up. We're getting a bunch of cortisol into our system. We can, and in some cases, our amygdala in our brain is starting to get overloaded. We're starting to move towards amygdala hijack, which is not good because then we're acting without thinking. And so understanding how to shift between sympathetic to parasympathetic, or at least get us a little bit more outside of sympathetic, starting to move the needle, is effective at getting that conscious mind back in line, right? So breathing does that. A visual tool that does that is very simple. It's called open gaze. Okay, they found when we are stressed, when we start getting stressed and anxious, we start to focus. Because our bodies are designed to focus in on the threat. That's what happens. So open gaze is when you are, say, looking forward, instead of focusing on something, you're just noticing your peripheries, right? You're just kind of letting it's also called soft gaze. You're starting to notice different things, or looking out to a horizon. That has been shown neurologically to start shift and physiologically to start shifting us from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So if you find yourself kind of getting into an anxious state, or starting to have fear kind of bubble up in your system, you can try open gaze and just relax your gaze, start to notice your peripheries, and your body will start to slowly shift. And you can use that in conjunction with some of the breathing tools.
Like before you go out on stage to do a little speech.
Yeah, I've done it before. You're kind of looking at the back wall and you're just noticing things, instead of focusing on the however many people
your heart racing or
yeah, that's right.
For viewers that might be interested in connecting with you, do you have any, do you want to share maybe a website that they can go to learn more?
Yeah, theattributes.com is the best place. And there we have, you can get the book there. You can get, so we have, I have an assessment tool on there for free. So you can go and get you can take a test that gives you or quiz that gives you a readout on where you stand on the grit attributes, the drive attributes, the mental acuity attributes. Again, it's a snapshot. So I would say when you get those results, just kind of think about what does that mean for me? Because you're being compared to 1,000 or so other people. So it's really, the whole process is supposed to be introspective.
Yep.
So you can take an assessment tool that's for free. You can get the book. I have some workbooks on there that people can grab to help them if they want to develop certain attributes. And then I have the Instagram handles. You can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn, and there's an attributes Facebook page as well. So all of it's there.
Well, congrats on the launch of the book earlier this year, The Business. That's fantastic. If you are interested in the attributes for your organization, you can also reach out to sales at BookPal, and we can provide books for group and organizational purchase. Really appreciate your time today, Rich. Fascinating conversation and very insightful. So looking forward to seeing more of you out in the wild, if you will. We have a couple winners for signed copies of Rich's book. Ava J, Joy R, and Mary H will be reaching out to you to get mailing addresses, and excited to send copies of his book out shortly. Our next AuthorConnect will be on July 1st with Peter Posadoy, and my colleague Danielle will be discussing his newest book, Honest to Greatness, How Today's Greatest Leaders Use Brutal Honesty to Achieve Massive Success. So definitely join us for that. And again, Rich, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.
You as well.